development shaping the contemporary lives of Native peoples in the United States and beyond. Her work incorporates both personal experiences as well as the events and symbols from Diné culture. Melanie's traveled around the world, connecting with other indigenous peoples in New Zealand, the Arctic, Russia, and the Pueblos of the Southwest. These travels have been the impetus for continued dialogue about indigenous cultural practices, languages, song, storytelling, and survival. Melanie's art is exhibited widely, both in the United States, internationally, with over 500 group and solo exhibitions, and her artwork has been reviewed in Focus Magazine, the Los Angeles Times, and the New Zealand Herald, to name just a few. Melanie is a professor of arts practices and the head of printmaking at the University of Colorado, Boulder. Please join me in welcoming Melanie as our third Collegiate Peaks Forum guest virtual speaker during our 2021 series here. Welcome, Melanie.
Thank you. So I just wanted to say thank you for inviting me, and if everybody could just make sure that their microphone is muted so that it doesn't interfere during the talk, that'd be great. And I'm making my image smaller so that okay. All right. So as you can see in the first image that I'm sharing with you, I'm of the Saltwater clan, born for the Bitterwater clan. My maternal grandfather clan is Edgewater. My paternal grandfather clan is Red Streak into the Water clan. That's how we identify ourselves in my community. And one of the things that I try to share with people is just where I come from. And fortunately, this evening, a lot of you know the Southwest. Let me see. Oops. I grew up in Ganado, Arizona, near Canyon de Chelly, and the canyon really helps me place myself in this world. And so part of my artwork goes back to all of the images that come from the canyon. The drips and the stains that show up into the work are similar to the drips on the canyon walls. It represents capturing time, change, all of that is in my work. A lot of times when I grew up, I spent time at the sheep corral with my grandfather on my mom's side, and a lot of the way I see the world comes from being in that space. I think I understand abstract imagery and shadows and light from just being with my grandparents. And these are images from my family land, things that I reference in a lot of my work. A lot of times with the prints and paintings I make these images of really strange animals, and a lot of times people say, where do you get the inspiration for the animals? And I tell them, you know, they come from a lot of the cats and dogs that we had growing up, and a lot of our animals were pretty inbred, so sometimes they'd have these really weird, you know, 6 or 7 toes, or just had like different issues, and you'll see that in the images of the work that I make. But again, just sharing my where I'm coming from and what I grew up seeing. I think a lot of times when people who aren't from where I come from see my work, there's sort of this what people would say primitive side and very abstract, and I say this is what's in my mind when I'm creating my work. This is an image of my mother and father on the right, and then an image of my mother's mother, Thelma Baldwin. She wove the rug that's behind my parents, and then there's another rug by my father's mother in the foreground there. If you ever get a chance, you can go Google the moth stories. You'll hear a story about these rugs in that moth story, but I share it here because when you hear that story, you'll see some of the rugs from that story. I grew up, and when I was in high school, I went to a Quaker boarding school on the East Coast. And after being in the Quaker boarding school, I went to live in Mexico for a year. And while I was in Mexico, I learned the language. I visited a lot of indigenous villages, and it really helped me see the world from that point of view. My grandfather on my mother's side, his dad was Mexican, but he never claimed my grandfather, and so it's a part of our oral history and my background. And so part of going to Mexico was to research and get to know that part of my family history. And when I was there, I spent a lot of time visiting different indigenous villages and meeting different people, and taking art supplies into communities and working with children in those communities. And some of the most amazing artwork I've seen, and I share this with my students and different people, are these images that were speaking about what was happening in their communities. So this says, pueblos, tus hijos se mueren de hambre, mientras el rico vive en la opulencia. ¿Esto es justicia? People, your children are dying of hunger while the rich lives in opulence. Is this justice? And a lot of times when I'm teaching, I'm telling my students, there's a story, or there are different things that are happening in your community. How can you get that story out? And a lot of times students think it has to be realistic or done in a certain way. And I say, you know, some of the most powerful artwork is like right out there where they're putting their voice, and this is something on the wall. And I find it to be really powerful. I started traveling a lot when I was younger, and one of the amazing trips that I was invited to go on was to go to Berlin in 1987. I went, there was a group of 250 students from the United States. There were 2 students from each state that were invited to Berlin to celebrate its 750th birthday. And we went there, saw the wall, and out of the 250, there were about 50 of us that were selected to go to Sachsenhausen. And Sachsenhausen is one of the concentration camps, and out of the 50, there were many people of Jewish background, and some of us that were Native that were able to go and witness part of our history, a very painful part of our human history. And it really taught me that there's so much that happens within the world that is similar, and we keep repeating different things in history, and we have to not forget these things. And so I share this imagery to explain to people how that is so similar to what happened to indigenous people. I've spent time traveling to a lot of different indigenous communities. This is up in Alaska. I went to visit a friend in Norvik, Alaska, above the Arctic Circle. And in her village, I visited with the elders. I think a lot of my practice is when I go places is to meet with the elders, to hear their stories, to share food, you know, to take time to just really be within a place. And I think part of my teaching is to try to teach students to slow down, to look at what's around them, and to listen to the stories of those who are older than us. And just being with each other as friends is really important, building that relationship. I started doing classes in France I think I was invited there in 1999. And when I went to France, I, of course, was in Paris. And when I was at the Louvre, I kept thinking, why am I here in this country? What am I going to share? How am I connected to this place? And I realized that when I went to the village that I was teaching my classes in, it was in Brittany, and it's a little town called Pontauban, and it's where Gauguin went to paint. And in that area, they have large stone menhirs that are similar to Stonehenge, and this is called Karnak. And a lot of it was, again, very similar to indigenous people here in this country. There were markers, there were different things in these places that were really powerful. And the houses were very similar to the Southwest. They had thatch roofs, and I took my students out to the communities and placed them in the landscape. And I told them, your job is to, again, experience this place. And I told them, you know, you draw, and while you're drawing, you're smelling the sea air, you're feeling this space and getting to know what this place means by being in it. And of course, in many of the places, I always tell people, we would go to the places to try the food that the locals would eat. My students and I at times would spend time in the coffee shop and having pastries and getting to know the people who made the food in Pontauban. And at the end of our course, a lot of the locals came to the exhibit and purchased artwork from my students. And some of the other professors were saying, why does everyone support your students? And I said, well, we spend time eating in their restaurants, getting to know them, talking with them, and they're returning that favor by coming and supporting the students. So food is really important. I always tell people, you know, that sharing of food is so valuable. After spending time in France, I was invited to go to the Amur River region in Russia. And I went to a little village called Bulava. I went to visit my friend Vanya, and he showed me and shared his culture with me. In that village, they only have electricity, but no running water. So daily we would walk to the river and take water back to his house. This is an image of that. And this is us having fish in his home with his daughter. When I was in the village, I remember asking some of the people, what does this tapestry mean, or this design? And this was my translator, and she said, you know, wait till we all get together. We're gonna put our outfits on, and we're gonna show you what that design means. And she said, those tapestry means this dance or this song. And, you know, we can tell you what it means, but our dances, our songs, and acting out what those designs means is really important to us. And I said, that's how it is with our people. Like, we have a song and a dance that go with different things. And again, that sharing between peoples is what is so wonderful about traveling and getting to know people. In 1995, I was invited to New Zealand to do work with the Maori people. They invited about 25 indigenous artists from the United States and other artists from all over the Pacific. And we stayed at the Opomana Marae in Rotorua, and this is one of the last days that we had there. But we traveled to different places to see their wakas, which is this long boat, and to learn about who they are. Since 1995, I've been back to New Zealand at least 9 or 10 times, and I've hosted Maori artists in my home in Santa Fe and Tucson and here in Colorado. This is me weaving flax. You can see the panels in the background. That's my friend Toi Maihi, who's showing me how to do weaving. This is another marae near Rotorua. And a lot of times when I've gone, this was in '99, we went to top of one of the volcanoes to do a morning ceremony to bring in the year 2000. And it was amazing when this young medicine man from New Zealand was doing this chant in the morning. As he was chanting, the skies opened up and the sun came out. It was really powerful. And I remember asking them, like before, like, I see that people are taking pictures, and I said, where we come from, they don't allow pictures. And they said, well, we've lost so much, so we want it all documented. We want you to share it with people. So I love to share this with everybody because it was such a beautiful moment. This is more of the landscape in New Zealand. A lot of the artwork that I make also deals with riverways and pathways. And one of the last times I was in New Zealand, we went to look at all of these riverways and pathways, and I collected rocks from different places. And we brought the river and the rocks together because I was working on a series of drawings that represented this stacking of rocks. On the Navajo reservation, at times in the summer when we have these ceremonies, there on the second night, there are different riders that go out in different directions. And sometimes there's two different families having these ceremonies. And when the riders cross, there could be like 40 riders on each side. When they cross in the middle of, out on the reservation, that point of crossing is like a special moment. And at home, we start these pile of rocks. They're either prayer rocks or like wishing places, and they're stacked up. And when I was in New Zealand, I was telling them when we met, it was like that crossing happening. So I'm doing these drawings of stacked rocks and of this meeting. And they said, well, we'll add to it by taking you to our rivers, telling you stories, and we can bring the plants, the rocks, and the water from each of the locations into the exhibition. So here are some of the rocks from the different locations. And then you can see my drawings there in the background. A lot of time I'm printing and then I'm drawing back into the surfaces. So all the prints I make are like small paintings. They're not like a mass-produced thing. When I was leaving, I had so many rocks. So early in the morning, I went down to the ocean to return the rocks and thank them for helping me do my work. I love this image. It's really beautiful. When I was in New Zealand, I kept running into people from Hawaii, and the Hawaiians were saying to me, how come you're always in New Zealand and you never come to Hawaii? And I said, well, when I go to New Zealand, the Maori people send me a plane ticket. And so then the Hawaiians said, well, we better get on it and send you a plane ticket. And so this is on the Big Island. I went there to work with Miley Andrade. After my workshop on her island, we went up to where her family lives in Kauai. But I spent about 18 days working with them around the island and seeing different things. And all of these things then show up into the artwork that I make. This is time I spent in Japan. I've gone there a couple of different times to work with the Japanese people, seeing different temples, talking with them. And when I go, I always try to make time to meet with the younger people in a community, because a lot of times we talk about how can we make change in the world. And I tell people I do it by meeting with younger people, doing storytelling and just letting them see a real Native American. So it breaks down the stereotypes of what they think indigenous people look like. So this is part of my art practice as well. In, I think, 2012, I was invited to a residency in Venice, Italy. I spent a month working on the island of Murano, and there were other artists, and part of the project that I did was I rode around on the Vaporetto and documented all of these different paths that people would travel. and I put it into the artwork. So you can see in the prints that I made, they're all the names of the different stops and the numbers. And it was really wonderful when we had the opening there. A lot of the locals came, and some of the other American artists were saying, "Why are they all talking to you?" And I said, "Well, because I spent time meeting with the community and putting their daily paths into my artwork, and they wanted to come see themselves in the work." So this is an image of that, the Grand Canal. And all of it takes me back here to Colorado. I live in Erie, Colorado now, and teach at the University of Colorado at Boulder. And it's all of these places that you all know that feed me and my work. This is an early piece from 1992, 93. I did a series of prints that were on wrapping paper. And I thought the best way to let people know how Native people look or seem is that we are always being wrapped with this image of what an Indian is supposed to look like. So I thought the best thing I could do would be to do a series of prints on actual wrapping paper. So there's that piece. This is another screen print. It's called Indian Lookalikes. I went to a school to do a project talking about Native issues and stereotypes, and the teacher gave this handout to the kids to work on, and I thought, oh my God, that is crazy. So I enlarged it, and then I put an image of myself in grade school into the piece so that, you know, to really help the viewer question that whole idea of, you know, Indian lookalikes. This piece is called She Keeps Silent. It's a large collage piece, and I made this piece because I was really shy and didn't want to talk about a lot of the things in our community, and I made this piece so that she could keep my silence. And in my mind, I said, you know, I'm going to talk about all these issues. I'm going to talk to people about who I am, where I come from. I'm not going to be shy. And this piece is going to hold my silence for me. Here are more mixed media pieces where it's a sort of a self-portrait with me, you know, thinking about different animals I've known. And then that feeling of feeling helpless, like not having arms, is in a series here. This is a monotype that I made, and it's about my uncle Albert, who went to the Vietnam War. Everyone at home would always say, you know, he died before coming home because it really changed him. And he passed away, and I had a series of pieces about my different uncles and family members because there's just so much, I guess, of our experience that people don't really talk about. And I just bring it out in some of the artwork that I make. This piece is called We Attempt to Forget. I use the map imagery in a lot of my work to speak about land base, and sort of as a reminder to people and to myself that a lot of this land belonged to indigenous people, and there were different layers of history in that. There's bloodshed, there's just so much to our history, and the map brings that to mind when you see it in an art piece. This is a piece I did in 1993, and it was speaking about the 1990 Indian Arts and Crafts Law. That law says that you have to prove that you're Native American, showing your certificate of Indian blood to prove that you're Native. And I printed it on the bluebird flour sacks because we use that for ceremony at home to make fry bread. And when I was growing up, we would sew it together to cover the mutton when we would butcher. This piece was on display at the Institute of American Indian Arts, and I went to the opening and I saw these two older Navajo women, and one of them was crying, and I thought, oh my gosh, I surely have offended somebody. And I went up and I said, is everything okay? And the woman said, you know, I grew up and we had clothing and things made out of flour sacks, and people used to make fun of us, and it was something really shameful, and nobody wanted to like talk about it. And she said, and here we are at your exhibit. And she said, I went to touch the quilt, and she said, that man there who is a security, he told me that's really important artwork, you can't touch it. And she said it was just amazing to her how she grew up with something that was shameful, and then now it's in a museum being protected by a security guard. So I love sharing that story about this piece. This piece now belongs in the Denver Art Museum collection. This is an image of me working on a screen print. I still work with drawing fluid and low-tech methods when I make my screen prints to get that real, you know, direct drawing method in the work that I make. And then a lot of times with different projects, I'm printing on the bluebird flour sacks. These are monotypes, and with the monotypes, I'm painting on plexiglass with the inks, and then I'm running it through a press. And a lot of times the work is about, you know, encouraging the viewer to tell their story, to share their story. Again, more images of mapping, and then images of my grandfather and my uncles. They traveled around doing work in different places. So it also touches on that whole history of migrant workers. This is a screen print called Indian Boy Art Project. Again, taking something that's very sacred and personal in our community and turning it into an art project, and just questioning that whole act. A lot of times with some of the prints that I make, I will be combining pictures from coloring books and history books. In the top right portion, there's a section of a history book that's collaged together with this image of the cowboys and Indians in the coloring book. This piece is called Removal. These are mixed media pieces working with the haka image from New Zealand. I asked my friends if I could photograph them doing the haka, and I've got images of maps and women to just, you know, call into knowing our history and challenging the viewer with our past. So on the left, you've got the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and then again, on the right, you've got the counting with the numbers of keeping track of our people, and that whole idea of counting shows up in a lot of the work I make for that reason. Now I'm sharing some of the monotypes that I make, where I'm working with stencils and layering the images onto the surface. Here are samples of the stencils that I work with, and I'm inking up both sides. I've also worked with lithography with my stencils, where I'll put the stencils on a lithostone and then etch it and get this layered image. And I use the image of the female a lot in the work, flowers and planting, little hands or gloves, to speak about like how we plant things and how we're, you know, finding our way with by touch and feel. An image of my studio. I'm pretty prolific, and I can't just work on one painting. I will work on like 5 or 6 at a time and make a whole series of things. And I'm always inspired by all these different images around me. I take morning walks and I'm always documenting different things I see. And how can I bring that thing I witnessed into my work? You start to see how those images, and then how like the sea turtle comes into the image of a figure counting. The numbers in this piece refer to me living with diabetes and keeping track of my blood sugar count. More monotypes with ghosting of images in the background. In, I think, 2012, I was invited to be a visiting artist in residence at the Denver Art Museum. And they had this studio space inside the museum. And you can see the museum in there on one side, and then the studio space that I was given to work in. This is the beginning of the residency. I filled the walls with all these wooden panels and canvases, and then I just would work every day, painting and drawing constantly and filling all of those panels. I think with my practice, I'm always trying to disprove the stereotypes that are out in our community of the lazy Indian. And so I just will, if I'm invited to do a project or a residency, I just like go crazy and make a lot of work. And I'm working all the time, and I keep a very tight schedule to be a really good role model, and again, to dispel those stereotypes of what an Indian artist is. This is in my community here in Colorado. I wanted to show the pathways because you can see how those paths show up in my paintings. They're either sidewalks, roads, riverways that show up into the paintings and the work I make. And again, the collecting I do. I collect a lot of weird little animals, go to antique stores looking at things, and all these things then come into the artwork that I make. It's a mishmash of like things I see and then how I experience them, and then I put them into watercolors, into prints. On the left, it's like a little chubby self-portrait of myself with my blood sugar count on the belly. This was an exhibit at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. They selected about 81 pieces of my work and framed them all for this exhibit called Geographies of Memory. And my large sculpture pieces were also shown in this exhibit. And it was really important to me because I think a lot of times artists want to show in New York or Los Angeles, and it was really meaningful and amazing for me to show in Albuquerque because it was so close to home. And I remember when we were putting the exhibit together, they said, you know, when we have the opening, we're not sure if a lot of people will come, but you know, it's the first time we're doing something like this, so we'll see how it goes. And when the opening happened, it was amazing. We had like over 750 people came for the opening. And it was really quite amazing because right across the street from the UNM campus is the Tamarind Institute. And the Tamarind Institute is known for reintroducing lithography into the world. And it's like the mecca for most of us as printmakers. And they were having an opening the same night. And it was really wonderful because they came to my opening and they said, you know, no one was at our opening. And we heard that everybody was at your opening. And so we came over. And I loved it because a majority of the community that was there were Native American people. They wanted to see this crazy Navajo person with her work. It was a really beautiful exhibit. This is a sample of one of my bronze pieces. We talked earlier about a lot of the travels I've done. This on the left, you see my friend Sue Pearson from Norfolk Island. She's someone I met in 1995 in New Zealand, and she, like me, went away to boarding school and discovered printmaking. And in '96, I went to Norfolk, and then in I think 2014 or 15, I took a group of artists to her island and we made work together. These are samples of Sue's work and collaborative pieces that we've done together. The last visit that she came to the United States, I took her out to Hopi land and to the Navajo reservation because I had been to her community. So I wanted to reciprocate by taking her out to our land and to take her out to Spider Rock. In 2012, I was invited to go to Crow Shadow to make a print. And I started working on this large relief and lithography print with the master printer there. But I had taken about 9 of these round 30-inch wide relief plates. And he said, I can't print them all, we can do one. And so I called a friend of mine, Nicole Pietrantoni, who's in Walla Walla, Washington, and told her my situation. I said, I carved all these plates and I thought we were going to print them at Crow Shadow, but they said they can't do it. And she said, well, our school is only 2 hours away. Why don't you bring all those panels up and we'll help you print them? So I drove up there, and this is Nicole Pietrantoni at Whitman College. And I worked with all of her students and we printed all those panels. It's the power of working in a print community with other artists. Like there's this sharing that can take place. And speaking of sharing, I've done all these print exchanges with different artists, and my good friend Rodney Forbes from Australia, he lives in Gippsland near Melbourne. And he invited me there to Melbourne and to Gippsland to do work. And this is at one of their museums. I went to Monash University in Gippsland and spent like about 2 or 3 weeks there working in that community. And really seeing a lot of the animals in the area. And then bringing that animal imagery into the prints I was making. All of this brings us back to the University of Colorado here in Boulder. And this is the new art building, the print studios on the 3rd floor. If you're ever in Boulder, you can always look me up on the school website and make an appointment and come visit me in the studios. This is our print shop, the lithography section of the shop. We have 3 different lithography presses. This is our screen printing studio. Our etching room, we work with ferric chloride and copper. Our intaglio relief space. And then this is the King family exhibition cases that I'm always putting print exhibits in. And these are 2 of our visiting artists, Michael Barnes and Chrissy Stakidis from Northern Illinois University. And Sue Pearson putting her work up in the hallway. When we have artists come that have been invited, we'll exhibit their work at times in the hallway for the students to see. The most recent residency that I've been at was at Colorado College in Colorado Springs. They gave me this gigantic studio to work in for 6 weeks. And you can see how I just go gangbusters when I start working. If I have like a focused time to make work, I just like center and I set up a schedule and I start working like a crazy person. Currently here at home in my home studio, these are pieces that I'm working on. I've been working on these wood panels, collaging prints, and then drawing and painting back into the surfaces. And it's just touching on a lot of different themes that are important to me. You can see the works in progress. And I always like to thank my dogs, Tidbit, Gus Gus, and BB, and my printing press for just giving me the energy to make all this work, to keep me going. And to thank my husband, Clark Barker. He travels with me and helps me out. And I just think he's such a beautiful human being, and I'm thankful to have found him. And I want to thank everybody in your community for letting me share my story with you. And I don't know, I'm so full of happiness and love to have been invited. I'm sorry I can't be there with you personally, but you can always email me. I'm really good at responding, and I just think that these types of interactions with artists is so valuable and important. And I'm excited to hear some of the questions you have. Don't be afraid. I think what you'll do is you'll use the chat portion of the talk to put your question in there. And then I think Greg is going to read the question and then I'll answer it. So I'm going to go to gallery and then we'll open it up to Q&A.
Melanie, if you could stop screen share.
Oh, okay.
See you.
Oh, stop share. Let me.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how.
Should just say stop share and then.
Oh, okay. I thought. Oh, every time I go to try to stop. I'm not sure how to stop it.
Let me see if I can.
It's weird. You'd think, oh, there it is. It was hidden. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Melanie, thank you so much. This is Greg speaking. It was really very wonderful to hear you talk, and your pictures are just fascinating. So I'm going to look at the chat screen here, and I'll just kind of start at the top and work my way down. So a question that is on here is, I have heard of the federal boarding schools and Catholic boarding schools, but not Quaker boarding schools. What was that like, and in particular, why that particular boarding school?
In the 1960s, a Quaker family came out to the reservation, and they knew my dad's grade school teacher. And Jan and Ellis Long from Westtown School invited my dad. Well, they spoke to his teacher and they said, is there a student that is interested in U.S. history that would like to come to the East Coast and come to a boarding school? And the teacher said, yes, there's a student, his name is Albert Yazzie. You should meet him. And so they met my dad and they asked him, and he said, yes, I want to go to that boarding school. And so he finished high school in 1961, and there was twice when we were growing up that we traveled across the country. And he said, when you get older, you can decide if you want to go to this boarding school and we'll send you there. My freshman year of high school, I wasn't ready, but there was a lot of really difficult things that were happening at home. And I told my parents at the end of my freshman year that I said, I think I want to go to that boarding school now. And I think it was a really important part of my education. I started making art there my senior year. I worked with an art teacher. Her name was Caroline Luce, and she was amazing. She taught me printmaking, and I was always making things in art before that, but that experience at the Quaker school really, it was hard, but it really helped me. So I know it's a long answer to that question, but I hope I answered the question.
Thank you. Next question. What are some of the best museums for indigenous Western U.S. art?
I would say the Institute of American Indian Arts would be at the top of the list for me. And then other museums that are run by the community, they're telling their stories. Those are really great museums to go to. But I think the Institute in Santa Fe does a really excellent job at letting current indigenous artists share their stories, and they do a lot of programming. And I taught there for 6 years from 93 to 1999, and there was just always a lot of engagement with the community. So I always like to promote that.
Thank you. The variety of work that you do is incredible. Mixed media, print, bronze, clay, watercolor. I'm curious, what inspires you to use certain processes or media at different times?
It depends on the projects that I'm working on, and also just I'm always hopping around to different things depending on where my muse is taking me. And I'm lucky enough to have access to the university studios, but also I have a studio in my home. So, and over the years, I've collected a lot of different things. In the early part of my career, I think there was all this self-doubt and this strange idea in my head that there was a proper way to do art. And as I've gotten older, I've realized the proper way is to jump in and start doing it, and to get to know it by just making and making and making. And you start to get this relationship with the process, and you break down those barriers that you set up for yourself by trying these different things. So at times I will see something and decide I want to try it, and then I'll go find an artist or a workshop or something, and then take it and learn about something, and then get over that fear of what the proper way to do something is, and then get into it.
Thank you. The next question says, this person lived and worked on the Navajo for 22 years, and they know all sorts of stories that you might be familiar with. Their sons went to George School. What Navajo community,
Rivals!
what Navajo community did you grow up in? Is the final part of that question.
Just so everyone knows, Westtown School and George School are rivals. And when I was at Westtown, we always would trade this moose thing back and forth. And there's this whole folklore around the rival between the two schools. And so it's really funny when I meet somebody who's part of the Friends School system, we always have this other conversation. So yay, George School and Westtown. I grew up in Ganado, which is where Hubbell's Trading Post is located, and it's really close to Winter Rock. And so that's where I grew up. Thank you for your question.
The next question is, did you teach outside of a university setting?
I guess I did that at the Institute of American Indian Arts. It was, at the time, it was just it wasn't a 4-year program at that time. So I did that, and that wasn't at the university. And then I do a lot of workshops in different places that are outside of the university.
Okay, thank you. This is a question actually for me, I didn't type it in, but as an indigenous artist, do you have a perception on whether it's easier or harder or no different for men or women who are indigenous to get into the art field?
I haven't found that too much. I think a lot of it boils down to everyone is that um, there's a lot of self-doubt within us as just human beings, and it's that self-doubt that really holds us back from moving forward with our art making. And I would say that's one of the biggest things that happens within the Native community is there isn't the self-confidence or the belief in um, really making it as an artist. And so I think that that holds our community back. But I teach art here in Boulder and in different places, and um, part of my job is to, I guess, give permission to people to make their work and to believe in themselves. And I always tell people that they've already come to me with the talents that they have. And my job is being a cheerleader. And I show them different things and then I cheer them on and I believe in them. And I tell them, if you put the studio time in and you do like the hard work in the studio, like you will make the growth that needs to happen. You will start to understand what that paint or that medium is telling you because you develop this relationship by doing the hard work of keeping the schedule up. And then I cheer them on.
Thank you. I'll just read a couple more questions. So if anyone else out there has questions, get them in quickly because we're about to wrap this part up. The next question is there a particular gallery that has more of your work or represents you that you would send people to go see your work?
Yeah, the Glen Green Gallery in Santa Fe, New Mexico. If you just Google my name and push images or Google me, the Glen Green Gallery has been representing my work since I think 94 or 95. And it's interesting because we have a relationship, like a family relationship. And so it's not really about, it's not a regular gallery artist relationship. They've come to a lot of my family events, and Carrie Green is a little younger than me, and she's now the director, and we've known each other, gosh, since 1993. And so when you go there, you see like tons of my work, and you get this whole other way of looking at my work through the family. And I always encourage people to go there because there's such a span of my work at the gallery. And then if anybody ever wants to meet me, they can just send me an email at CU Boulder or look me up online at CU and send me questions. And I usually have a teaching schedule of Monday and Wednesdays on campus. And so sometimes I always say to people, it's a public university. You can just pop in, like you paid for it. so you should come see me.
Well, how about this for the last question? Do you do workshops outside of the university? And if so, how would someone find out about them?
Usually people will contact me and ask me to do a workshop in a community, and then we negotiate what they're able to pay and what their setup is, and then I'll go to the community and do the work. I don't really have like a social media presence. Like my gallery runs the Facebook page and all of that. I used to do it and it was too overwhelming. So I don't do it anymore, but they do it. And then I do so much traveling and so many workshops. It's really hard to keep a list of everybody who wants to do stuff. So I just say to people if they want something, to get a group together, and if they have an art space or community space, they can we can work out something, and then I'll go to different places and do a workshop. So it just depends.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your gracious answers. And I'll turn this over to one of my colleagues for closing statements. Thank you again.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you, Greg.
This is Christine Whittington. I'm on the Collegiate Peaks Board, and I'm so happy that you were here to speak with us tonight. You're so inspirational. You are so attuned to the land that we are very happy to present you with this gift. And I think there's going to be an image of it at some point. But we're going to be presenting you, yes, there it is.
Oh my God, it's beautiful.
Yes, a gift. Yes, you're so attuned with the land, and this is, and you collect rocks.
I do. That's gorgeous.
Yes, it is Amazonite, and Amazonite has been treasured for millennia. It has been included in burials and beads from many thousands of years, but one of the most important deposits of Amazonite is from the Pikes Peak area, which is in Colorado. And this is your Amazonite. It will be arriving to you via the mail. And one of the theories is that the green color of Amazonite was so important because it represented the agricultural, the advent of agriculture from hunting and gathering and so on. So it's an ancient mineral, and we find that it may be a great addition to your rock collection.
Oh my God, I love it.
We're so happy to have you here. It's been wonderful. And so happy to have all of our participants. We love you. We want you to all stay safe and healthy, and join us when we come back with in-person lectures at some point. But thank you so much, Melanie. It has been fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I just want to thank everybody for making the time this evening to hear my story and to just be together in this way. I think a lot of times with what's going on in the world, it's hard to have these moments to share. And I feel part of the trips and the things that I've done when I do these lectures, it's a way of giving back out to the world the gifts that I've been given to travel to these places. And I'm just so honored to be a part of your series and to be in your community. And please contact me, and when we're able to get together, come to Boulder, see me at the university, and let me meet each of you.
We would love to come see you. Thank you so much, everybody, and thank you, Melanie. It's been a delightful evening and absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone, in July, Craig Childs will be our next lecturer. He's a fascinating speaker and writer, and probably on Zoom. So watch your emails and watch the Collegiate Peaks Forum series website for some. We'll just keep doing Zoom lectures, and then we'll do in-person lectures. Thank you, Melanie. It was fabulous.
Okay, bye-bye, everybody.
Goodbye, Melanie.
Should I just leave, or I don't know? I feel kind of sad to go. I'll wait till everybody goes. So.